G'day everyone, welcome to our short presentation on the elements of narrative and focusing on genre for this one. So the elements of narrative that we're looking at are genre, plot, structure, point of view, stylistic devices, theme, character, setting, and conflict. And so we'll look at all of these in turn, but today we're going to focus on genre. So what is genre? Basically, genre is the broad categories or broad types of text. Now they can be really broad, such as this. This is what we tend to focus on in literature, but they can also be smaller and even subcategories. So for example, mystery is a genre, and then there's subgenres in mystery, such as cozy mystery or hard-boiled mystery. So fiction, we're looking at anything that is essentially a made-up story. Non-fiction is anything that is based in the real world or based on real events. Now that can include autobiography, biography. It can include also blog posts. It can include news articles. Poetry is, well, poetry, things such as haiku, quatrains, free verse, sonnets, that's all part of poetry. Drama, any drama based text that's meant for performance, and again that has its own, that has genres that it often shares with fiction and non-fiction, such as thriller, mystery, comedy. And prose is any text that is not written with rhyme or rhythm or meter. So they're the broad types of genre. So let's take a look at why genre matters. For the writer, genre matters because the writer needs to select the genre that suits the purpose and the audience of the text. So the audience, or the reader, on the other hand, the reader needs to know the genre so they know what to expect from the text, and they also know what to look out for in the text. For example, what type of themes should they be on the lookout for in the text? Now, in terms of entertainment, when we're choosing a book or maybe choosing a movie or a TV show on Netflix or something like that, we want to know what to expect, what sort of emotional experience we're going to have with the story we're about to select. So that might be, well, I'd like to have a scary experience, and so I'm going to go to the horror genres. Or I want an exciting experience, so I'm going to go to action or thriller. For us studying literature, we should have an awareness of the genre so that we know what type of elements to look out for. What type of characters are we going to get? What type of character development are we going to get? What type of structure are we likely to get? It will also help us know, are there any conventions that are going to be subverted deliberately by the text, so that we can be on the lookout for them and be more sensitive to those things. So before I just said that genre can be broad categories, it can also be more specific. So here's just a few examples of the more specific characters, and you can think things such as the Amazon book categories. And again, these are broad genres. They break down into their subgenres as well. And before I used mystery as an example, sci-fi has its different genres as well, whether that's military sci-fi or space opera, comes into play there also. Let's move on. So what is the connection between genre and the other elements? And the answer is genre conventions. What is considered a norm for that genre? So let's take a look at how this might apply. And of course, there's so many genres and so many different conventions for each genre. We're not going to go into that today, but just some questions to help guide us to start looking in the right places for the genre that we've selected for our literature study. So the elements, the first one there is plot. What events need to happen, or what type of events need to happen that are a match for this genre? So for example, in the thriller and action genres, we're always going to get the all is lost moment. That's usually in the last 15%, 10%, around that mark of the story, whether that's a film, a TV episode, or a novel. There's going to be that moment where it looks pretty certain that the villain is going to win and the protagonist is going to lose. But through some miraculous hard work or feat of endurance by the protagonist, or some friends come to help, that the hero then overcomes the villain. So that all is lost moment is an important plot point that needs to happen for the action and thriller genres. Stylistic devices. Genre interacts with stylistic devices because different genres will have different expectations and conventions around the type of language that's going to be used. Is there going to be a lot of descriptive language? Is there going to be a lot of poetic language? Should the writer have a high level of emotive language? Or should it be statistics? If we're thinking about nonfiction and reports, there's going to be possibly more use of facts and statistics than emotive language. And so that can help guide us, once we know what text we're writing, what type of language to use in there. Structure. What story shape is suitable? So these are things such as, if it's an action story, it's probably going to be a person in the whole story. And also, what type of ending are we going to have? Are we going to have a tragic ending, or are we going to have a successful ending? Also, if we're thinking about non-fiction text, is this going to be a persuasive structure or maybe an informative structure? Point of view. What's the suitable point of view to use for this genre? So, for example, young adult, a really common point of view to use is first person, which really helps the reader engage and enter the story, because we've got one person's point of view, and it's a very close point of view that the author can explore with that point of view. Third person is quite often used with larger science fiction, fantasy, thriller works, because it really enables the author to develop different characters' point of view, which then helps develop the tension in the story. And also, I sometimes include level of formality in point of view. How friendly or how formal or distant is the language going to be? You can put that in stylistic devices as well, but for the purposes of today, I'm putting it in point of view. All right, setting is up next. So setting is sometimes very important depending on the genre. Certainly if we're writing sci-fi, setting is going to be essential. Fantasy is going to be essential as well. The readers of those stories really want to have an immersive experience in the setting. If we're going for romance, then it might be less important. However, something like Romeo and Juliet, the setting is important in terms of the setting needs to be an integral part of the forces of antagonism, which then leads us to conflict. Picking up on our Romeo and Juliet example, that setting is important because one of the key parts of the conflict is this is person versus society conflict. The society that Romeo and Juliet live in does not allow them to have a relationship. Now, the other types of conflict we've got here are person and person. So this is the hero versus the antagonist type conflict. There's also self and self. This is more like Hamlet, where Hamlet is having this internal struggle of whether to take action. This comes up in a lot of relationship style stories as well, where the character has this internal struggle going on. Person and society, we covered that. Person and environment. This often comes up in the survival type stories or the end of the world type stories as well. Now, themes, I said before that genre can help us pinpoint or may help us be more sensitive to the types of themes that we're going to get in the story. And that's because different genres tend to work well with certain themes or areas of themes. So, for example, dystopian future themes, dystopian future works, such as 1984 or Hunger Games, they tend to work well with themes that deal with the corruption of society or politics. Those types of themes work well with those. So understanding what genre we're working in can point us in the right direction of the types of themes we should be looking for as readers. And character. What character archetypes are suitable for the genre? So a nice point of contrast is Romeo and Juliet versus Midsummer Night's Dream. We've got the trickster archetype character. In Romeo and Juliet, I would argue that Mercutio is a trickster character, and he becomes one of the forces that drives Romeo and Juliet into the tragedy of the second half of the play through his willingness to engage in violence. On the other hand, in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck is the trickster character in that story, and yes, he causes a lot of problems. He's a force of antagonism, but he's also one of the characters that really pushes the comedy theme in Midsummer Night's Dream, and arguably he doesn't have the malicious or violent tendencies that would lead the play into tragedy. Rather, he has the playfulness that takes the play into the comedy genre rather than the tragedy genre of Romeo and Juliet. So essentially, that's how our genre can help point us in the right direction of what to look for. All right, thank you. And if you have any questions, please let me know.